AEW star Dax Harwood reportedly has heat in the AEW locker room after his comments on the first episode of his new podcast discussing the brawl-out situation and hoping that CM Punk returns to the company. Got very latest details on that. Plus, Sasha Banks is now officially a free agent. What does that mean about her future with New Japan Pro Wrestling and possibly AEW in the future? We've also got the reported reason why Tay Mello was pulled from the AAA event recently. Kenny Omega opens up on if he would return to DDT Pro Wrestling and if he would like to wrestle once again for Pro Wrestling Noah. Sting discusses being involved in the Great Muta's final match, and new matches announced for this week's edition of Dynamite. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling, and it just won't go away, will it? CM Punk and AEW, the drama surrounding the situation regarding the brawl-out scenario, CM Punk, his suspension, his injury, his absence, will he return? It happened in 2022, but still in 2023. We're still going to discuss this ad nauseum because the story just won't go away, and the latest chapter in the CM Punk AEW saga comes from, ironically enough, Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer Radio, which is quite interesting. Now, Meltzer has spoken about the fallout from Dax Harwood's podcast, where he recently spoke about CM Punk and the hope, certainly the hope that there would be a willingness from the elite. There would be a willingness from the elite and CM Punk to put their issues aside, and then that would lead to possibly a situation whereby CM Punk could return. Even CM Punk himself kind of commented on that as well, did he? With an Instagram post saying duh and all that kind of stuff. So it's led to a latest chapter in this. Let's get straight into this because the new FTR with Dax Harwood podcast is reportedly getting some strong reactions from inside the AEW locker room. And according to Wrestling Observer Radio, they are not very favorable. The first episode of FTR featured the topic of none other than former two-time AEW World Champion CM Punk. Now, Harwood is a close friend of Punk's and expressed a desire to have the former AEW World Heavyweight Champion back in the company following the brawl-out incident. However, according to Wrestling Observer Radio, a lot of people backstage at AEW were not happy with what was said by Harwood during the episode. Wrestling Observer Radio's Dave Meltzer suggested that AEW should have a team meeting on Wednesday in Seattle before AEW Dynamite, stating that the locker room is not on the same page and that tension could fester further if the division is not addressed outright. He added that they need to air everything out and even said he suggested doing the same back in March and 2 weeks before AEW All Out. The AEW locker room did seem like it was on the same page after Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley took the roles of locker room leaders as the trio helped to smooth matters over following the incident at All Out. However, when Harwood was asked about the infamous incident on the podcast, he said that it seemed like people were only getting a portion of the story of what went down that night between Punk and the Elite. Harwood was not involved in the backstage fight and wasn't even in the arena at the time, but was FaceTimed by Punk afterwards. Now, I must say, when I saw this and when I heard that Dave Meltzer had spoken about this is why it is so important to get two sides of the story, because Dave Meltzer, just a couple of days ago, December 30th it was, Dave Meltzer quote tweeted a tweet from 411 Wrestling, who put a tweet out rather by Dax Harwood, and Dave Meltzer quote tweeted it. And the initial tweet from 411 Wrestling said, quote, was Dax Harwood talking about Dave Meltzer, saying, quote, his star ratings, that's his opinion. The historian Dave Meltzer, I have a lot of respect for. The journalist who puts out a narrative that him and his buddies want to, little less than top-notch respect from me. Now, that's all Dax Harwood said. He basically said Dave Meltzer and his historic nature of covering pro wrestling don't have a problem with that. The issue that Dax Harwood has, and I think it's a fair one, and this has kind of been shown with the All Out incident, is that sometimes only one side of the story is put out there. That's not to say that it's the truth or it's a lie, but most of the time the truth lays somewhere in between two opinions or eyewitnesses of events. And a lot of the time, a lot of the information that was put out there by Dave Meltzer was through and from people like Kenny Omega, like the Young Bucks, like people close to them. That's factual. Now, Dave Meltzer responded saying, quote, a narrative that including saying, You had many of the best matches of the year. Should win tag team and best feud of the year. Seriously, of all people. Now, he says that, and just days later, he's on Wrestling Observer Radio saying, well, people in the locker room weren't happy, and Dave Meltzer suggesting that AEW should have a team meeting. And then he goes, I said the same thing back in March, and I said the same thing back after All Out. So wait a minute. Take a step back here. So Dave Meltzer is sort of implying that he's saying that to Tony Khan. Who's running that company, if that's that case? Dave Meltzer's messaging Tony Khan saying you should have a team meeting, And I saw this report, I just went, wait a minute. This is where, in my opinion, reporting, you're not reporting facts anymore. You're not reporting the news anymore when you start doing stuff like this. Because clearly, Dave Meltzer's reports there on Wrestling Observer Radio and Brian Alvarez's, they're biased by what Dax Harwood has said or inferred about them during his podcast. And Dax Harwood, if you listen and read the quotes, if you listen to the podcast and you read the quotes of what he's saying, it's nothing too slanderous. It's nothing too outrageous. All he says, and I think this is the right route to take, is he just says, okay, I think everything that's been put out there, there's elements of truth to it. I think things have been exaggerated. I think things have been left out. Remember, you're only hearing one side of the story, or you're hearing someone else's version of events through another person. So don't assume that everything you read is the truth, and don't assume that everything that put out there is gospel. Eyewitness testimony can vary from person to person. And if you've got two different eyewitness accounts of the situation, it's not always black and white. There are shades of grey. That's all Dax Harwood was saying. And at the same time, he also said that he wanted CM Punk to return because there was money to be made. The locker room, in his mindset, was better off having the best wrestlers in the world in it. And if they could put their BS aside, if they could put their big egos aside, and that includes CM Punk, then everyone could make a lot of money. And I don't understand why. Now it's like, that's got him a ton of heat. Well, from who? That would be my response. From who has it generated said heat from? Because to me, if Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez are saying it's generated him some heat in the locker room, or some people are upset, I wonder who are upset, because chances are it's the same people that it's been reported don't want CM Punk there in the first place, which is Kenny Omega, which is the Young Bucks, which is Chris Jericho. Dave Meltzer, he even himself in the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter reported that Chris Jericho had told people in the AEW locker room he would do everything in his power to ensure that CM Punk didn't return to the company. He went up to Punk and described him as a cancer to the locker room and a detriment to the company. So that's really where probably the heat comes from. It's probably from those people that have picked up the phone to Meltzer and said, I'm not happy about that because I don't want Punk to come back. It's no coincidence at all. It's no coincidence that Dax Harwood says that about CM Punk in the first episode of his podcast, and then you now get a report in the Observer that says Chris Jericho is doing everything to ensure Punk doesn't come back. And then on the Monday edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show, you then have saying Dax Harwood's got heat, there's going to be another team meeting. And what's that team meeting going to consist of? Most likely it's going to be led by the locker room leader, that is Chris Jericho, and it's going to be, we need to all be on the same page and we need to all be moving in the same direction, blah blah blah, basically saying you're not allowed to want CM Punk back in the company. And at this point I'm saying, are we being objective anymore? So, look, this is a channel whereby we get lots of different news stories, we read them out to you, we report them to you, we let you come to your own decision. But when I saw this, I just said, okay, come on. And I'm sure there might be some people that don't want CM Punk in AEW, and they might hear that and roll their eyes. But the idea that Dax Harwood always got heat because of what he said, to me, that's just no. That, to me, sounds like a vendetta from the person that's reporting it. And I don't say those words lightly, because I don't like to believe in all the conspiracy of this, that, and the other. But there's clearly a group of people in AEW that don't want CM Punk back in the company for whatever reason. And that same group of people happen to talk to someone who reports news and has a big, substantial following, and that person has big inroads into the company. So I kind of roll my eyes when I see that. That's just my opinion. You can let me know your thoughts about that in the comment section below, but it's ironic, isn't it? It certainly is. Sasha Banks is now a free agent. We're, I guess, going to see Sasha Banks make her New Japan debut in about 48 hours, and a major update has emerged on the status of Mercedes Varnado, formerly known as WWE's Sasha Banks, ahead of her potential New Japan Pro Wrestling debut. Varnado hasn't appeared on WWE television since she and Naomi walked out on a Monday Night Raw taping in May of last year. Following reports that Varnado is set to be at New Japan Wrestle Kingdom 17, Dave Meltzer reported that Varnado isn't expected to return to WWE and that her deal was set to expire at the end of 2022. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful has now confirmed that Mercedes Varnado is able to take wrestling related bookings, indicating that she is finally now a free agent. Yesterday, on January 1st, SAP tweeted, quote, "Good morning, Mercedes Varnado is free to take wrestling bookings," end quote. With Varnado currently in Japan ahead of Wrestle Kingdom 17 on January 4th, some have speculated that she will confront IWGP Women's Champion Kairi on the show. Varnado had previously teased a match between herself and Kairi during her wrestling hiatus. The CEO of Bushiroad, New Japan, and Stardom's parent company recently addressed these rumors, saying that he couldn't really comment on that, or she could possibly appear, or she could be in the Tokyo Dome. Now, stars from WWE and AEW will be defending their gold at the Tokyo Dome show, with FTR from AEW set to put their IWGP Tag Team Championships on the line against Bishamon, and WWE's Kyle Anderson to face Tama Tonga with the never openweight title up for grabs. AEW President Tony Khan's reaction to New Japan working with WWE has been revealed, reportedly having no issues with it, and also being fairly aware very early on that they were going to be working with WWE to facilitate this Kyle Anderson deal. So it's not really a big deal when it comes to that, but the expected, well, she's in Japan. I mean, at this point, if Mercedes Varnado, or she might be known as Mercedes Moan by that point, she had recently trademarked that, if she doesn't show up at Wrestle Kingdom 17, something has gone wrong, something has happened. The chance she's going to show up there. The big question is she going to show up on January 11th in Los Angeles for AEW? That's the big question. As of right now, we still don't know. We still haven't heard anything. As time gets closer, we're about, 9 days away from that at the moment. As time gets closer, if we hear anything, of course, we'll talk about it here on the channel. But at the moment, everything is still up in the air. But if you do want to see Mercedes Varnado in a post-WWE career, watch Wrestle Kingdom 17, because there's a very, very, very high chance she's going to be there. This is a really interesting, wasn't it? What's going on with AAA and AEW right now. Now, at AAA Noche de Campeones on December 28, Conan stripped Tay Mello and Sammy Guevara of the AAA Mixed Tag Team Championships after the duo didn't show up for their advertised title defense against Lady Shani and Octagon Jr. and Commander and Sexy Star 2. Mello wrestled on the December 28 episode of AEW Dynamite, teaming with Anna J.A.S. to defeat Ruby Soho and Willow Nightingale. Speaking on his Keeping It 100 podcast, Conan explained what happened with Sammy and Tay not showing. Quote, "Tony Khan pulled Tay because some girl, I don't know who, had COVID. I'm not sure why Sammy was pulled because he didn't even appear on the effing show," the show being AEW, he stated. Later in the show, Conan recounted the other times Tay and Sammy missed AAA shows, saying, quote, "The first time they missed their flight. The second, this girl is Brazilian, Tay Mello. When I was handling Rey Mysterio's business in WWE, they wanted him to go to Brazil. To get a visa is not easy. She needed to get a visa, and this is a problem we've had with Phoenix and Daga. All these people, they wait until the last minute to get a visa. Tay sent me her visa papers. I tried to get my visa. I couldn't get it on time. We'll be at the next show for sure. They sent me a video. Everything was cool. The next thing I know, Tony pulled her because somebody had COVID. What I don't understand is why did they send Sammy? Sammy didn't do shit on the show." AAA announcer Larry Dallas backed Conan's claims in regard to Tay not making the show. Quote, "Tony Khan has about 100 people on his roster. One person got sick and he decided to screw another company, I guess, and put Tay in a meaningless match that means nothing for her. That's the way I view it. Apparently someone got COVID or someone got sick, so he had to use Tay. They were supposed to lose the titles a couple of weeks ago, I believe," said Dallas. So this kind of goes back to what Meltzer had said previously, that they wanted to do that match a couple of weeks prior, but Willow Nightingale was injured or out. She couldn't do it. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she did have COVID. We don't really know. But Tony Khan wanted to do that match on Dynamite. I can understand, and I'm usually not the biggest backer of Conan or anything like that, but I can understand why he would be a bit frustrated by that, certainly. I would be when he looks at that and he says, look, what was that match on Dynamite? That match meant nothing on Dynamite. To me, it just comes across really as sort of two people that really didn't want to make the booking. And if that's the case, why did they get involved in the first place? I don't really understand that one. Kenny Omega is going to be making his return to Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling at Wrestle Kingdom 17, and he's also discussed a potential return to DDT Pro Wrestling. Before he broke out in New Japan and helped form AEW, Omega honed his craft at DDT Pro Wrestling, spending 6 years in the company from 2008 to 2014. He held multiple titles during his time in DDT, including the KOD Tag Team Championships and the DDT Extreme Championship. Omega returned to DDT in November 2019. Speaking to Monthly Purisu, Omega was asked if he'd be open to a return to DDT. Quote, I did the one show at the Rikugu Sumo Hall, which was incredible. It was an incredible feeling. I can't put into words what it felt like to go back there and to see so many familiar faces. My mind is blown when New Japan will run a random poll as to who is the best foreigner of all time in New Japan, and then I win it. And it's like, how? You remember me? And you remember me fondly enough to say I'm that guy? It's incredible. So then for me again, this goes back a little bit in 2008 for me with DDT. For those fans, DDT told me once we announced that you were going to be there, and we played that video, our phones were ringing off the hook and we sold this place out just like that, he said. I was thinking I could tear up. I talk about it too much, but you remember me from that far ago like I don't. I don't think I could do that in Winnipeg, and that's where I was born. You know what I mean? But that's just how special those fans are. They don't forget. It means a lot to them. It's special to them. And it's like you said, Sonny, it's a real family environment and atmosphere. It's family, it's trust, it's respect, it's the loyalty. It's all of those positive things that go into the idea that a lot of the people have an idea of Japanese culture, which is that honor system. You know, everyone thinks, what is Japanese culture? They think it's about samurais, ninjas, and Godzilla. Omega continued, I say, yeah, sure. But if you take some of the things that make those, what they are embedded within those are those qualities. What makes it such a special country. So for that fan base to remember me and to give me just a real nice homecoming, it was wonderful in 2019. And I would love, of course, to be back at some point in time, whether it be for DDT, for New Japan. I've never actually once wrestled for Noah, but since they're part of Cyberfight, now would be a cool time to do something. So you never know. He could possibly wrestle a Pro Wrestling Noah in the future. One thing we know he is going to be doing in Japan is facing Will Ospreay at Wrestle Kingdom 17. And Will Ospreay has also spoken about his future with New Japan Pro Wrestling, as well as that big match against Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom 17. Now, speaking in an interview with Fightful, Will Ospreay addressed his decision to sign with New Japan over Evolve back in 2019, saying, quote, there was the Evolve contract that could have opened doorways, but I knew in my heart if I stuck it out with New Japan and worked hard, no one has the work ethic that I do when it comes to wrestling. Paul Heyman had extended a contract with Evolve to Ospreay in 2016 at Inside the Ropes Live in York Hall, London. Ospreay went on to discuss the difference between his presentation of work ethic and what others show, saying, quote, a lot of guys put their work ethic in social media, bodies, and other ventures outside of wrestling, but my whole thing is I wanted to be one of the best wrestlers going, and that's down to everything New Japan has done. The thing that works with New Japan is I can stay in Essex, fly out, business class, head over, and live a real comfy life where I've got my family and New Japan, but with other options, I don't know what's going to happen. But my heart says New Japan. It would also open up on his current salary and how that has affected his life, saying, quote, money talks these days. I'm on phenomenal money. It's money that I could literally only dream of. It's one of the things where I want to make sure my mum and dad never have to work again. I want to make sure this house is paid off one day. I've still got 24 damn years left on the mortgage. With all this in mind, it doesn't look like Ospreay is going to be hanging up his boots anytime soon, concluding, quote, a long way of bumping and feeding to go. I'm just inspired to wrestle at the best and to have complete freedom of who I am as a wrestler. If anyone else has control of me, New Japan allows me to be as fluid and crazy as I want. Having someone else control of me does intimidate me a little because I'm not the best actor, but I'm one of the best wrestlers. Ospreay, of course, as mentioned, is scheduled to face AEW's Kenny Omega for the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship at New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom 17 on January 4th. So it would appear by that interview, Ospreay's basically saying, look, I'm not going anywhere. And chances are when his contract comes up, he might stay and re-sign with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Sting is going to be part of the Great MUTA'S final match for Pro Wrestling Now. That's later this month on January 22nd. Now, of course, Sting has actually addressed being chosen for the Great MUTA'S final match, taking place at Pro Wrestling Noah's Great Muta Final Bye-Bye on January 22nd. Muta will team with Sting and his fellow AEW star Darby Allin. Speaking to the ringer, Sting spoke about his return to the ring and how the involvement with Muta first came about, saying, quote, I was honoured, first of all, that Muta wanted me to do that. I talked to him a couple of years ago. He was asking me if I'd want to come back, and I said I would consider doing it. A couple of years went by, and now he's coming to the end of his career. He reached out again and said, man, I'd love to have you involved, whatever you're willing to do. On the impact the request from Muta has upon him and his respect for Muta, Sting explained, quote, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm just blown away that he's like one of the last of our era in Japan standing, and the similarities between the two of us. We were always so much alike as far as our size, abilities, and styles were different, but I loved working with him in Japan. I loved working with him here in the United States. I mean, the Fukuoka Dome and the Tokyo Dome, 65,000 people. I'll never forget those times with the Great Muta. Sting also discussed the importance of returning to Japan and the significance of this match to his career, explaining, quote, "I'm looking forward to coming back, realizing it will undoubtedly be the last match I ever have in Japan and maybe the last appearance in Japan as far as wrestling goes. So certainly historic on several levels, and it's certainly going to be exciting to see what they do for that final match." Finally, matches have been announced and segments have been announced for AEW's new version of Dynamite Wednesday night, a revitalized version on TBS. One of the biggest marquee matches brewing in recent episodes is Ricky Starks going one-on-one with Chris Jericho. Of course, Jericho's coming off the loss of his Ring of Honor World Championship, while Starks has recently lost his first ever AEW World title match against MJF on the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite. Wednesday is also a special night for the company because it marks the first time in that it's going to be in Seattle, Washington. The hometown boy Darby Allin will have an opportunity to win the TNT Championship when he faces the current champion Samoa Joe. Also, there will be Bryan Danielson. He's going to be facing off against Tony Nese in singles action. Other confirmed matches include an AEW World Tag Team title match between reigning champions The Acclaimed against Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. We've got Swerve Scott versus AR Fox, and TBS champion Jade Cargill teaming up with Red Velvet to face Kira Hogan and Sky Blue. It's also been confirmed that Hangman Page will appear on the show and give an update as to where he stands health-wise, seemingly setting up a match against Jon Moxley in the LA version of AEW Dynamite as well. But there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.